Hey everybody, KC here. So one of my favorite writers is Ace Atkins, and I love the 10 novels he contributed to the Spencer series after Robert B. Parker died. I love the Quinn Colson series of novels that he's written and plans to continue writing. This year he has two different things out. He did a short story slash novella for Amazon called Havana Run, which is enormously entertaining, and he's got a new novel out called Don't Let the Devil Ride, and in which he introduces a new hero. It's a new locale. It's Memphis. It is a terrific book. It is filled with musical allusions, and it's got great tone to it. It's got the texture and the scenes. The scenery is just wonderful. It totally evokes Memphis of about 15 years ago. And I thought it was a terrific book, and I couldn't wait to get him back on Morning Newsbeat to talk about it. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ace Atkins about his new novel called Don't Let the Devil Ride. Enjoy. Ace Atkins, welcome back to Morning Newsbeat.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, you've got a lot of new stuff going on. You had a couple of long running series that you were doing. You did the Spencer books and the Quinn Colson books, and this year had two new projects. Earlier this year, you came out with Havana Run, a short story that I think was only available on Amazon. Am I right?
Okay.
And then this great new book, Don't Let the Devil Ride. So this is fabulous, and I'll tell people where they can buy it at the bottom. But what prompted you to move away from things that you had been doing and that were quite successful to just do different stuff, whether it's a short story or for at least for the moment, is a standalone novel?
Well, I'm still working on, in fact, right now I'm still working on ideas for the Quinn Colson series. So it was a momentary break from that to work on some projects that have been gestating for a long time. And it was really something, from Havana Run to Don't Let the Devil Ride to a new book that I'm working on right now. I just, it had to be now to work on those projects after writing two series for almost a decade, both with Quinn Colson and both for Spencer. Now, with Spencer, I am not writing those books anymore. I wrote 10 of them. I had a wonderful time doing it. It was a pleasure working with the Parker family, but there's just a lot of ideas that I have and a lot of stories that I want to tell. And now is the time. And so I was really happy to work on that thing with Amazon. It's kind of a novella. It's about 50, 60 pages based on an idea that I've been wanting to write for some time about an adventure in Cuba. And then Don't Let the Devil Ride is not there may be some serious potential there. We'll see. And then I'm working on a completely different story right now.
Yeah. The is it one of the things that actually happened in the middle of this, and this is more of a business question than a writing question, is you actually changed publishers. You
Yes.
with one publisher for a long time, you've changed publishers. From a business point of view, does that make it easier to kind of to change horses, to try some new and different things?
I think so. I mean, I was with Putnam for a number of years, both with my Quinn Colson and both with the Spencer novels, and I had a wonderful time there. And the opportunity just came up to work over at HarperCollins with the imprint of Morrow. And it was certainly, the question is what can you do that's different, and what can you do that's new, and what stories would you like to tell? And the opportunity for me, again, these are some of these notes, particularly with characters like Porter Hayes and with Addison's story, these are notes I've had for years.
Well,
And
I read somewhere, did you say someplace that actually Don't Let Level Ride? You had this idea 20 years ago.
well, I don't think that, not necessarily the whole novel for what became Don't Let the Devil Ride, but I've really known about this character Porter Hayes for quite some time, and he's just kind of say it in shorthand, he's kind of Memphis's Spencer. you know, he's every city I think has a great hero, a great detective, and Spencer is certainly very synonymous, with Boston, and I wanted to create or to write about a really iconic hero, and for me that was Porter Hayes. And Porter Hayes is somebody I just every time I'm in Memphis, it's only an hour away, it's very, very close to where I live in North Mississippi, I think about Porter Hayes all the time. And I'm not getting any younger. It was if I was going to write a story and tell his story, the time was now.
We'll talk a little bit about that character because I was fascinated by music. One of the things I've read in some of the stuff that I've read in terms of the background of the book, played a real important role in sort of your both construction of the story, kind of developing the texture for the story, but also even in the name of the character of your hero.
Yeah, he really came about. I'm such a fan of Stax Records, and for any of your viewers who have a chance, they should watch this terrific documentary on HBO about Stax Records. It came out about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and it's a great overview of this legendary soul record label that came out in the 1960s and produced people like Booker T and MGs and Rufus Thomas and Otis Redding and Johnny Taylor and Isaac Hayes and Isaac Hayes and his partner David Porter were the soul of Stax. They were the ones who created a lot of those great hits. In fact, right now, Isaac Hayes' grandson has a lawsuit going on against Donald Trump right now for using the song "Hold On, I'm Coming" without his permission. They created so many of those iconic hits like "Hold On, I'm Coming" and "Soul Man" and just endless legendary group. But when I would see that on a record, like for somebody like Sam and Dave, you'd see all of the writing credits, and it was all David Porter, Isaac Hayes, David Porter, Isaac Hayes, and you'd just see Porter Hayes, Porter Hayes. And I said, boy, that's a great name for a detective. That's the perfect name for a detective. And so that's how long I've had this story or this character in mind. And he certainly comes from the feel of that music, and comes from that feel of soul music. Porter Hayes is a black man in his 70s. He has seen everything. He was actually a police officer at the time that Martin Luther King was assassinated. He became a close and personal friend with Elvis Presley in the 1970s. He's seen the city change, and he's seen things for the good and the bad of the community. And so he was a guy to really guide you through the history of the city of Memphis.
Yeah. The musicality of the whole thing really fascinated me in part, and this is one of the things I love about but a genre that you write in. I mean, first of all, because there's always references to music. There's song
Yeah.
titles, there's stuff, whether it's the Spencer series, Quinn Coulson series, other writers like Michael Connolly. I find myself as a reader expanding my musical palette, if you will, because I'll read something and I'll go on. It's fascinating. I was able to I mean, I'd never heard of David Porter before. I had no idea who Isaac Hayes I'd heard of, obviously,
Mhm.
but not David Porter. And there's just like this amazing thing called the classics. And you download it from iTunes or Apple Music, and it has all his songs with Isaac Hayes, and each one has a preface in which he describes the circumstances under which the song was written. And it
Wow.
becomes this really fascinating, for those of us not that familiar with the genre, it becomes this really interesting, first of all, educational experience in its own way. But you provide sort of a window on that I think goes beyond just here's a really cool yarn.
Well, I think, you go back, you mentioned Bob Parker, and Bob, brought me to so much great music, and particularly with jazz,
Right.
early on, where he was mentioning, Johnny Hartman. And, of course, I knew who Sarah Vaughan was, but then he would mention a deep cut of Sarah Vaughan's and Ella Fitzgerald. And you always had that. And I think when I hear that music, it sounds like Parker to me. It sounds like, when I would get into the mood to write a Spencer book, that's what I listened to get into that mood. And when I was thinking about the tonality of "Don't Let the Devil Ride" to write a book for Porter Hayes, it's putting on Booker T and them G's, or putting on one of the Porter Hayes, songs, or "Hold On, I'm Coming," or something wrong with my baby. And that felt like that character, and that felt like the who that character was, and felt like the tone that I wanted to achieve. So it helps me. It's not just parceling out things that I like. It helps me get into that. In the same way, in a very same way but very different music. Classic country music. When I'm writing about Quinn Coulson, I'm listening to Charlie Pride and Waylon Jennings, and that sets me down that path of the feel that I want to embody in those books.
Yeah. Well, I can remember when I interviewed Parker, and I'm sure he said this to everybody who interviewed him, but one of the things he said was, a good novel in his mind, or when his novels were read, he said in some ways you should be able to hear them. That
Yeah.
the sentence structure actually has a kind of musicality about it if you do it right. And I think that's totally true about Don't Let the Devil Ride.
Well, and that's something I learned from Parker. I mean, it wasn't by, not only studied the man for a number of years and, corresponded with him a little bit, and then later had the fortune of working for his wife. But through studying those books, I learned a lot about the feel and tone of a book. I mean, he was an absolute master, and I take those lessons from Parker and I apply them to my own work. He said one time something like, "What is it that makes your book so successful?" And he said, "I think at the very heart of it," he said, "the reader may not realize it, but he said it's the language, it's the flow and the feel of the language." And he said that the reader may not notice that or notice what I'm doing, but I think that they still feel it. And so I take that, and like I said, I've learned from him. I mean, I learned from Bob and Elmore Leonard, and so many writers I'm indebted to, and that was like my education.
While Don't Let the Devil Ride is set in current day, modern day, to me, reading it, it felt like a period piece. And I'm not even quite sure why that is. Were you sort of conscious of that? I mean, is that an off the wall sort of observation?
Well, you might not notice, but it's a small detail, but a little, it is set 15 years ago.
Right.
And it's so funny to me that 15 years ago, to us, it's maybe not a period piece. I hate that, I'm writing a book right now about the 1980s, and it certainly be called a period piece. I think of a period piece as, the 1940s, or a book with, showing
Right.
people, women wearing petticoats or whatever. That's a period piece to me. But I wanted to do a book pre-smartphone age,
Hmm.
and it was also important for the desperation of some of the characters in this novel. I wanted it to happen during the recession,
Right.
and I also wanted it to happen during the heydays of war in Afghanistan, where there were stories that I wrote about as a journalist, where incredible amounts of money were flowing to people in the contracting business, and anything they could to Department of Defense contracts and things like that. So it worked very well for 2010, and that's But again, I don't think of that as a period piece, but there were some things about it, particularly just smartphones change everything, and of course to for me make stories somewhat less interesting.
Well, it's funny you say that. We've been watching a series that when we didn't watch it when it first came out, called The Americans, which
Oh,
actually
great.
takes place in the 80s. And it's amazing. People have to have to keep going to payphones. And it's like smartphones. I mean, it just changes the structure of a story and eliminates an entire level of tension that that you could use before they came out.
Yeah, and it ruins a lot of tension. It really just douses some of the things that were so much fun. And I'm working on something set during that age of the Americans, involving espionage, and it is so much fun to write about things that you don't have to do anymore. The way that secrets would be passed today are completely different than they were in the 80s, and you still had people doing dead drops and using payphones, and there were people were not being followed with GPS. You actually had uh, you know spies following spies, and it's a more exciting era. I think that once you get in to the Google age, so many great novels could have been solved in probably 5-10 minutes with a good Google search. That's all you needed.
So what's this? So is this a new fascination with, because espionage plays a part in the new book? You're
Sure.
working on something having to do with espionage. Is this a new fascination, or are you just sort of indulging something that you wanted to do for a while but haven't had the opportunity to do?
A little bit of both. It's not, I wouldn't call it, it's actually a very old fascination that I've had. When I got started reading, when I became a really serious reader when I was a teenager, this was in the 80s, and espionage books were the most popular thing out there. I mean, John le Carré and Tom Clancy and Ludlum, and I mean, you couldn't buy enough, of the espionage books, and fiction and nonfiction. So, uh, and for me, it was Ian Fleming. I mean, I don't think I was a huge reader at all until I found Ian Fleming, and it just was like, wow, this was incredible. I'd never read anything like it in my life, and I love Ian Fleming. And then that kind of led into reading crime novels, and I know Ian Fleming was a big fan of Chandler, and then getting into Robert Parker, and then getting into more, and so my taste kind of, not necessarily my taste changed, but I think that also the market changed a lot, as far as what people were reading and what people were buying. And so when I started writing, it was very much from a classic, crime, noir kind of story. But I never forgot about the roots of writing about espionage and writing that particular story. And that again goes back to the question you asked earlier about, working with a different publisher, and presenting some somewhat crazy ideas, which is, I've always wanted to write a spy novel. I really want to do this, and having an editor who trusts me enough to let me pull it off.
Well, at some level, I mean, you were a Florida newspaper reporter for a long time, right? So
Yes.
noir and mysteries probably was more accessible to you than, say, spies running around
Oh,
Europe.
yeah, absolutely. For me, you know, being at a homicide scene, or kidnapping, or being over at the police station. I mean, Spencer's world was very familiar to me. I mean, I spent about as much time as Spencer at the police station, and chatting up and trying to get information from cops and detectives and following stories. And so that world, yes, certainly was very, very familiar to me. But I love the travelogue and spy stories. I love what we kind of know now about the Cold War. And it's prime time from when I was a kid. It's so many memories of that that was such a huge deal, and pressure upon us, everybody, the Americans, with the conflict with the Soviet Union. It was just endlessly fascinating to me.
Well, you'll appreciate this. The other day I found a box in my basement. That, and part of what was in one of the things in the box were all of these Ian Fleming paperback novels that I had bought in the
Nice.
late 60s when I was growing up, and they were all like
Yeah.
75 cents a piece, and they're all still there. It's like, oh my God,
Well,
it's like finding buried treasure.
they're
There you
mine
go.
right here. These are all the Signet paperbacks. I don't know if I could find a Fleming. I probably can. Well, they're up there
I
somewhere.
trust you.
I've got a lot of John D. McDonald. Here we go. Here we go. Nice.
I
Does
have
this look
I have
familiar?
that paperback. Absolutely.
Yeah. Lovely. These 40 60 cents.
Wow.
Uh, and beautiful graphic design. I love
I
these things.
know.
I have
Gorgeous.
them all. I've been collecting Fleming for years and years, and they were very hard to find before the days of eBay.
So, last question before I let you go, which is, I'm curious, when you think about all these characters, so you've written Spencer, you've written Quinn Colson, now you're writing Porter Hayes. Do you think of them as a writer as all being sort of in the same universe? Are they coexisting in the same universe, but just in different parts of it? Or are they completely separate? I'm just curious in your own mind.
Well, I think that
I mean,
for
if,
me, I think
if Porter Hayes drove south, would he eventually bump into Quinn Colson? Not saying you're going to have him do that, but would he?
well, they're kind of existing in different eras. But if an older Porter Hayes was to drive south, yes, he would run into Quinn Colson, and there is an overlap of that universe. There is, even in the spy novel, there's characters from Don't Let the Devil Ride who you meet, or some Russian characters that are in Don't Let the Devil Ride, and they show up in events that took place 25 years before that. So I like that cross connection. Of course, the Spencer verse or the Parker verse is not my own.
Right.
So there's no cross connection between my own world. But between Quinn Colson and Porter Hayes, and the spy book that I'm writing right now, certainly it is, to me, all the same place.
So you're creating an Atkins verse, is what you're doing.
Atkins verse,
There you go.
exactly. Yes.
Well, the book is fabulous. I really appreciate you're coming back on Morning Newsbeat to talk about it. It's always great fun, and I look forward to talking to you again when the new book comes out.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Here, thank you. See ya.